Welcome back to the Fortrea podcast. I'm Dr. Mala Puri, Senior Medical Director at Fortrea, and this is the second part in our special series with Breakthrough T1D, focusing on pediatric type 1 diabetes. In our previous episode, Dr. Sanjoy Datta, Chief Scientific Officer at Breakthrough T1D, and I explored the scientific foundation behind treating type 1 diabetes as an autoimmune disease and the critical importance of those first 100 days after diagnosis. Today, we're going to shift our focus to the human side of the equation. We'll tackle the real-world hurdles that families face when navigating a new type 1 diabetes diagnosis, from the emotional overwhelm to the information overload. More importantly, we'll discuss how we can design clinical trials that work for families and to explore the transformative power of true partnerships between sponsors, CROs, and patient advocacy groups. Because at the end of the day, advancing type 1 diabetes research isn't just about the innovative science. It's really about meeting families where they're at and creating pathways that honor both their hope and their reality. Let's continue our conversation with Dr. Sanjoy Datta.
We have all of these amazing things in the works and trials being designed, but what are the hurdles that we might anticipate with trying to have children and families participate? I often find that when a child is newly diagnosed, there are a lot of emotions, a lot of grieving of what their life used to be. Families are upset with, what is their life going to look like now? How can they be a normal child? And not only are those emotions being processed, but they're kind of drinking from a fire hose in terms of the amount of information that they're being presented with, learning about the disease, learning about how to take care of their child, checking finger sticks or CGMs, pumps, administering insulin injections, looking for signs and symptoms of hypoglycemia, meeting with nutritionists, and even just the size of the teams that are involved with, this new diagnosis. They're meeting with nurse educators, with physicians, nutritionists. Often they're in, academic hospitals, will be medical students, fellows, residents. It's all very overwhelming. So how do we best approach a family about a clinical trial in addition to everything else that they're, dealing with a new diagnosis, especially knowing the criticality of being enrolled and dosed within a certain period of time to preserve that beta cell function?
So you'll hear me use a word time and again because, and it's worth being repetitive here because it is so important. You talked about the hurdles here. The first one I'll say is education and awareness, and it's education of both the HCPs, so doctors and allied healthcare professionals, and including primary healthcare, because when you don't have diabetes, you're going to a primary healthcare.
Yeah.
You're not going to an endocrinology practice. And then also education of the community, of the T1D community and the general population that do not know, A, what type 1 diabetes is. B, they don't know type 1 diabetes is different from type 2 diabetes. C, as you said, they don't know. It's like a ton of bricks that hits them with this diagnosis. So all of the things you mentioned are very valid, and I think education awareness will be the first hurdle to be removed here. Second, you were kind of alluding to it in a different angle, is a systemic change. That's going to take a long time here. Right now, medical practice, particularly endocrinology practice, is not incentivized, and we do not have centers that is providing holistic care. You need psychosocial support. You need nutritionists, as you mentioned. You need diabetes educators. You need technology experts to be able to use the CGMs and the pumps and to be able to use how do we cloud monitor these things here. So the system needs to change here in the United States and other parts of the world. We're not geared today to be able to deliver these therapies here, other than in the research hospitals that are very advanced. There are quite a few in the country, there are quite a few outside the world. But when you look at the garden variety medical practice here, this level of sophistication is not there. This level of resources is not there. And there is no incentive to be able to provide this. And there's also a dearth of endocrinologists in this country and around the world. All of these things compound the second hurdle that you talked about. Third hurdle is also, right now we have one immune therapy, and I've said this twice already, the third time I'm saying you. So I'm foreseeing a world in the not too distant future when we will have 3 or 4 immunological and beta cell survival therapies, hopefully even regenerative therapies come about. Um, and, then people will understand it's real. Yes, yes, it's unfortunate that we got a type 1 diabetes diagnosis in the family, but it is not a death sentence. And I apologize for using a strong term here. It is A, manageable, B, maybe even reversible. I think you can deal with this here. Um, and I'm not saying type 1 is easy. And I know how harrowing this disease can be 24/7, 365. But all that said and done, there are tools available. So I would say the three hurdles, there are probably 20 hurdles, but the three in rank order would be education and awareness, both of the clinical community and the families there. Number two, which is a harder nut to crack, would be able to develop these holistic care models and implement them with incentives to be able to take the holistic care of a person. So a person doesn't have to take 5 days off from work to see a nutritionist one day, diabetes educator now that they are technology specialist, and then the endocrinologist. Right now, most of the regular cares are not equipped to be able to do that. And third, as I mentioned, we foresee a world like today. If I can indulge you for a second, when the first artificial pancreas or AID system came out in 2016, it was new. It was very new. I mean, people were working on it for a while, but it was new. Today, fast forward 9 years, there are 8 or 9 approved systems in the market, can be given to age groups as low as 2 years. That's huge advancement. Now there is more awareness, there is choice, there is understanding how to deliver these therapies. In this case, the devices, how to manage them. Our systems have been advanced here to be able to manage terabytes of data. We're not there yet with these disease-modifying therapies, in whether it's the first 100 days or the first 6 months. But I foresee a world where we will be, and it'll get easier and easier. So 3 things I would rank order. I can go on, but I'll stop there.
Well, I also think that, one thing that's really important from a sponsor side or, just a trial design standpoint is to recognize that, you're not enrolling just this child, you're enrolling the whole family unit. And I think, trying to educate the families from the provider side, like you really have to gain the sense of trust with these families at the very beginning. And to your point, like by participating in a study like this, you probably will have more of a holistic visit when you come for your study visits. I have found that like with pediatric studies in general, a lot of people will participate in them for altruistic purposes, even if that doesn't show any direct benefit to them, but they want to improve things for another child. So I think that, especially when designing these studies, it's really critical to think of, what are the assessments that are critical for this study and what are the quote unquote nice to haves, and
Yeah.
maybe not have as many nice to haves and make it as simplified as possible for these families. Even just thinking about, missing days of school, missing days of work, trying to have more flexibility in scheduling study visits so that they might offer evening hours or weekend hours, just small things like that that can improve the experience in participating in a clinical trial. And also, there might be visits where they don't need to actually come to the sites, but this can be done via telehealth, or you
Yeah.
can have mobile clinical services be involved. So just trying to think outside of the box and try to make the experience as best as possible for these families.
Mala, you use 2 words that are very critical that I didn't use earlier. One is trust. This trust is a huge component. Generally, a person, I think, trusts their physician the most. So the trust the physician the most. So the physician is encouraging and giving the knowledge about the trials, the benefits of participating in a trial, even the benefits of being in a placebo group, as you were alluding to, is not an altruistic purpose of doing the greater good for the bigger masses there, but also the fact that you will get very good care when you're in a trial there, which you mentioned there. So the first word, trust, is important. And the second thing important you mentioned here is make this design, customize the design to the person, not to the sponsor. And this is nothing against sponsors. I learned something in my early days of research. I was in pharma before coming to Breakthrough T1D. is, I'm trying to remember the exact way it was worded, and it's still stuck with me, is that don't bring the trial to the patient, bring the patient to the trial.
Mm-hmm.
I learned this very early on, and that is so true here. What works for them, and design it around their needs, And sponsors do a good job of understanding form factor, frequency of dosing, type of dosing. Is it IV? Is it this? Or is it twice a day? Is it once a week? And they do a good, or form factor in case of devices, they do a good job of doing those things. But I think where they can go deeper is to be able to involve the community in the trial design, not bring the design to them and say, hey, swallow it. That's not going to work. I'm not saying they're doing that, but that's conventionally the way things have been done. And I've also been informed, as I mentioned before. So bring them early on and see what works for them. Bring different age groups. Bring the family, like you said, if it's especially if it's a child who can't give his or her own consent. Bring the family there, see what works for them, and design your trial around it. And if those intelligent things can be done, simple things can be done, and you said not have too many nice to haves. A sponsor, whether it's a pharmaceutical sponsor or an academic sponsor, often it has a lot of scientific interest and want to collect some blood for biomarkers, want to collect DNA, want to do this. Yes, while all of those things are valuable, but if that's adding a lot, 2 other blood draws in a week, if that's adding another oral glucose tolerance test, which is very burdensome, if that's adding, you need to do this every night, those are things that will be deterrents here. One other thing we didn't bring up is smart trial design. We need to be able to do smart trial design, not conventional placebo-controlled RCTs, at least in the early days of testing therapies. And the entire community, pharmaceutical sponsors, academics, us, Breakthrough T1D, like one of the largest funders of type 1 research and advocacy, we have started doing it, is to be able to do smart trial design. Part of it is the burden you discuss, but part of it is you can get answers quickly. You can make fail fast approach. You can have these things done in a way smart design. You can do them in a smart combination way. And we are doing combinatorial trials right now. And rather than going with the gold standard placebo-controlled RCT for 1 year with a 1-year follow-up, and at the end of that, you see that you don't have any results. And so that also removes some of the trust, some of the hope. And so there are things that are happening now as we speak, and we're involved in a lot of those things in smart trial design. That's one of those things that I think we need to get better and better at, and we can, and we are. But I think we are going at 20 miles an hour. We need to be going at miles an hour.
I think that, involving patient advocacy groups such as yours early on is very important. What do you see as like a true partnership looking like between a CRO and an advocacy group with supporting this population?
Yeah, a lot of the things have come up in our conversation today here. One is we have established Participant Advisory Council, PAC, or Patient Advisory Committee, PAC. Unfortunately, they're both PACs, but anyway, we established these that we've heard directly from both academic and industry, commercial sponsors that has been tremendously valuable to them. And we've intentionally put together a very heterogeneous group of people with type 1 diabetes. By heterogeneous, I mean different age groups, different socioeconomic strata, different, because they have different kinds of challenges they all deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so that is one of the things that advocacy groups such as ours can do very well, and we can also be the trusted partner in doing that. And so the sponsor or the CRO or all these people can work with the patient advisory councils that are led by Breakthrough T1D or a similar organization. The second is to establish regulatory pathways that are facile, which we do very well with the regulators in the US and around the world here. Pathways that are sensible, because right now it's broad strokes, one size fits all for diabetes. That shouldn't be the case. And so, what is the right regulatory endpoint or pathway for type 1 diabetes? And then the other thing is also the sponsors can work with here in the education side of it, which I've already mentioned many times here. So put together some educational materials here around what is T1D, what are the stages, what are the benefits of these therapies, not just glucose control, but of these very boutique and novel therapies coming out here. And finally, the partnership between advocacy organizations and CROs or sponsors can also be, I look at it as 1+1 is 3.
Mm-hmm.
1+1 is not 2, because each one brings a different angle. We are the neutral partner to all of these things here. Our voice with reimbursement, our voice at the regulatory agents, our voice at changing policy, changing clinical guidelines, like American Diabetes Association or European Diabetes Association guidelines. We've done that. And we're beginning to do more and more of those things. So this is an area where I think CROs and sponsors should work with us, in addition to what I mentioned just 2 minutes ago about clinical trial design. And the point you mentioned about making the trials, what's the word you use? Friendly, something that they can accept in their life. It fits in their lifestyle. They don't have to change their life, turn their life upside down to be able to participate in a trial.
Yeah, no, I've, in my experience, I've found that like one of the very valuable things about partnering with the patient advocacy groups is you can even start at the level of looking at the protocol. They often can bring insights that you might not have thought of, using your PACs
Yeah.
to do that. And I think the other thing that's important, is just logistically trying to make things as easy as possible for these families if they're traveling from long distances, providing transportation, providing lodging, just small things I think go a long way.
Yeah. And those are being done, but we can certainly do better and find out exactly what it is. We have used both the hub and spoke model, because there are many rural areas, non-urban areas where people will have to travel 200 miles
Right.
to get to a trial site or to get to an established, like we discussed, a holistic diabetes care area. And now, can people come 200 miles? No. And you brought up the word of telemedicine, telehealth. There are many things that can be done through these. And so there are a lot of tools available at our disposal right now to be successful. The question is, how soon do we educate ourselves and do it? And the analogy I used, we're doing it. We're going at 20 miles an hour. We need to go at 60 miles an hour.
If there was one thing you could change about how we support these patients, especially in those first 100 days, what would it be?
Providing as much holistic care as possible. And holistic, I mean not only the specialized holistic components of holistic, such as diabetes educator, nutritionist, maybe a tech expert, the endocrinologist, and a psychologist, but also holistic in the sense of fitting in with their life. It's not enough for you to go to you can go to this elite hospital system in diabetes, in type 1 diabetes. They'll have all these in one. It's a one-stop shop there. How are they going to get there? Which part of it can be done remotely, so the parent doesn't have to take a day off from work, the child doesn't have to take a day off from school, so on and so forth. And so if there's one thing that I can change for the first 100 days, it would be able to provide that mental support that, yes, it is a terrible disease. I'm sorry you got it, but it is not the end of the world. And, there are many people achieving, and which I admire a lot. There are football players, there are dancers, there are newscasters, there are all kinds of these professionals, scientists, of course, scientists. You can do almost anything with type 1 diabetes, which a lot of people don't know. They think that, you're a woman, you got type 1 diabetes, you can't ever become pregnant. Even years ago, that was given to them by the doctors. Right now, we know that's not true. B, there are ways to get around.
This has been such an interesting conversation and very informative. One of the things I'd like to end this with is to try to say what's one actionable item for our listeners, whether they're researchers, clinicians, or advocates, that that they can do today to make a difference for these families.
I'll tell you my most favorite, because I firmly believe in it. The one thing is, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. It is your right to know. It is a duty and responsibility, a right to know as a person with diabetes or person with risk of developing diabetes. It's your right to know. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power for a clinical community, healthcare providers, allied healthcare professionals, and all of them. It's their duty and responsibility to know that to have the knowledge there. And finally, for advocacy groups, for us to be able to be aware of what are the shortcomings, what are the hurdles, like the word, I'll borrow your word, what are the hurdles, and what is our role, Breakthrough T1D, what is our role in this ecosystem here? We all play a role here. And having the knowledge of that and a strategy to execute on that. Now, how do you acquire that knowledge? How do you utilize that knowledge? So the one thing I want to leave our listeners with, and thank everyone, thank you, Mala, and thank everyone for listening here, is remember, knowledge is power. It's your right to know. It's a duty and responsibility of healthcare providers to know.
Oh, that's great. Um, if I were to have to give the same thing, I agree with the knowledge is power, and kind of with in tandem with that, I think that having accessibility is also key here. And I think that's through the knowledge. We do have TZIELD, but there are a lot of providers that are hesitant to offer it to their patients, and patients are having to look on their own as to where they can go to have these therapies done. So that kind of is hand in hand with the knowledge, but also having the accessibility, making it so that it's not the families that are trying to be proactive, but that this is just the way things are. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the listeners for joining us in this important conversation. As we've heard today, the first 100 days after a pediatric type 1 diagnosis is filled with both complexity, but also a lot of opportunity, from rethinking endpoints to reimagining partnerships. It's clear that progress really depends upon collaboration, compassion, and this commitment to innovation and to education. A special thank you to Dr. Sanjoy Datta for sharing his insights, and to all of the families, clinicians, and advocates that are really working tirelessly to support these children with type 1 diabetes. If you're a researcher, sponsor, or healthcare provider, we hope that today's discussion has inspired you. Until next time, I'm Dr. Mala Puri, and this is the Fortrea Podcast.